All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
It's the Monday audience. The Monday recorded audience is my favorite recorded audience. Nice to see everyone here. I know. How could it happen? I know I've still spent my weekend wrestling with the same question. The blow to the head that we all took last week and may last 4 years and longer if things don't go well. Great to have Kim here, who did manage to make it to work.
Kim, how
she
are
doesn't
you?
quite arrive when we expect her or want her to arrive, but she has a lot of extenuating circumstances always, so we kind of give her a pass. Tony, who is insanely punctual.
Thanks, Tony.
It is great to have you in the mix, but you have to leave early today because we're both in the middle of a, what's the problem, Tony?
No, tomorrow I leave early, not today.
Oh, not tomorrow, okay.
Tomorrow.
Anyway, well, then I'll save my remarks till tomorrow. Conspiracy theorists, welcome. You found your place. I am not a conspiracy theorist. In fact, I think I'll maybe knock down or at least contextualize a few conspiracies that are out there. But I will always take a meeting. I'll always take a meeting. No matter what the conspiracy, I'll hear you out. So I'm not one of those people who goes, oh, my God, that's just, I'm thinking, oh, my God, that's just, but I don't say it. And I want you to know, all you conspiracy theorists, you have a forum here. We will examine and share even some of the things to which you refer when you talk about everything from election to COVID to alien and space invasion. I'll hear it all. Why not start out by hitting the like button, says Karen Cooper. Yes, smash it like a boss.
Smash it with
Why
your
not?
iron rod.
Helps us in the algorithms of YouTube. I got some emails over the weekend, and I'm going to be getting into everything. You know, I mean, I think we've got a really great show. You know, I'll just say this because it relates to who's coming up on the show. We have the brilliant Gary Dietrich, bottom of the hour. He joins us on Mondays, and we will discuss what happened, what's going to happen, and I'll even touch on these conspiracy-related theories as to what outside elements, Starlink, the Musk involvement, etc., might have affected outcome besides just the vote. But I think overwhelmingly, I'm focused on the vote, and we'll discuss it with Gary. But when it comes to the vote, you don't have to go far for conspiracy theories to see the way in which voters are disenfranchised in this country, and we've seen it over and over and over again, and we've talked about it here, anticipating wildly aggressive voter disenfranchisement, which did happen. And so to the extent that we go over the ashes of the election from a philosophical standpoint, from a strategic standpoint, from a political standpoint, it is fair to look at the way in which so many people were disenfranchised from the voting rolls. And to do that, there is only one guy, and that is Greg Palast. And he will join us at the top of the second hour. So Greg, who did that great film which described the way in which the voter rolls were shed, are being shed, plan to shed themselves of so many voters. He has more information, new information on voter disenfranchisement that affected directly this election. I mean, voter results in Georgia, North Carolina. These are places where, you know, the Democratic vote, already an endangered species, very much affected by messing around. So that's the second hour. Also, Karen Dawn joins us in the second hour. She's once a month the person who gives us the state of the state on the animal kingdom. We call it A Word About Animals. And I do have an update that Courtney is going to not hang out her shingle for True Crime Corner for the rest of the year because she's busy with some stuff. She may come through with some true crime segments along the way, but not every Monday is what she's telling me. But she will come today to further explain that entire thing. So she'll be through. So that'll be like a little bit of a, what would you call that? Palate cleanser to some of the politics that we'll be talking about.
Sure.
Okay. So that's the lineup. I want you to be aware of it. I did see that my favorite McAllister has weighed in. She is Lucy McAllister. A big shout out.
Big shout out
for a super sticker for $20, $19.99. Thank you. You're first into the super sticker game. Thank you for supporting us. Lucy McAllister, as you know, if you're a regular on the show, she is, I've never met her personally, but I know that she's my favorite McAllister. You're probably thinking, well, isn't Kim's last name McAllister? Yes, Kim's name is McAllister. I do adore Kim, as you know. Otherwise, I wouldn't put up with her crap like that she gives me every day. But my favorite McAllister is Lucy McAllister.
I thought you liked all that crap. No, right?
Well, Lucy is all love. And I'm just saying, maybe you want to try all love. Thank you so much,
Thank
Lucy.
you so much.
I don't want to dwell on it. Is Mark blurry or is it me, someone's asking?
You don't look blurry to me. You look good.
Okay, it's you then, Tammy.
Yeah.
Something about SNL. I did see a little bit of SNL. Who was it was Bill Burr. It was funny, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really good. I saw a little bit of it. I was going to read a couple of emails. They're long, and
here it is. Katie, line on SNL. This election proved that Dems can't rig an election. Yeah.
That's a great line. I had not heard it, so thank you. The stuff I'm getting is related to any number of things about the Democrats and what they should have done. I'll just give you one of the longer emails, but so I'll just grab little bits and pieces. This is from Brad in Chicago. Brad O in Chicago is really cool. He comes to our meetups, and he listens and watches regularly from Chicago. He says, I guess I'll email. It's hard to communicate via short super chats. I suppose that's true. It's probably.
I've received a lot of positive letters.
You know, I love your show and agree with 90% of what you say, but on this issue, I'm compelled to challenge you.
Oh, I like a good challenge.
Me too. This is very exciting.
What?
All right.
This is what he meant by bringing crap, right? This is good.
Let me be clear, he said. I'm not arguing Biden did nothing. Still, I am taking issue with your characterizing him as some master legislator. I didn't say he was a master legislator, but fine. If you want to say that, I did. You're saying I characterized a legislative victory, and yeah, that's true. I characterized some of his legislative victories, so that's fair. While he did face opposition, it was widely reported that the Congress in the first and second halves of his term were some of the least productive in history. All right. Well, that's not owing to Joe Biden, first of all. That's owing to a Congress that is at odds with him, right? He doesn't have control of both bodies. So that's going to lead to a legislative logjam that was planned. I mean, by the way, the legislative fight that will prevent a sitting president from getting whatever he wants, I would say he or she, but clearly America will never, go that way. So it's all he. It's very much related back to Newt Gingrich. He started that. Newt Gingrich's thing is oppose, oppose, oppose. Literally, whatever the sitting president wants from the opposing party, do not support it. So anyway, when you talk about the least productive Congress, I think you have to look at that. I considered the infrastructure bill a huge lift given that situation that I just described. Yes, in a big infrastructure bill packed with pork, you know it was packed with pork, Mark, because in a world of party line voting, he got something like 30 Republicans to cross over. Yeah. Then he says there were some nice environmental provisions. There was also a lot more drilling permits and continuing subsidy for fossil fuel companies during his term. Yes, there was a great insulin price reduction, although there are rumors much of the drug price effort will be curtailed in the future. But what about the thousands of other drugs? Okay, this is a long email, and that's only point A. So let me just respond to this. The way in which you get a bill passed, sadly, is to pack it with some pork, to put stuff in there for those Republican legislators that you need to cross over to your side to get the bill passed. Tell me another way in which he could do that. So when you point to that, it's like, wink, wink, you know it was full of pork. I got it. That's the way you're going to get the vote on it. You know, when you call these Congress people, you have to be able to say, hey, and there's something in here for your constituents. That's why many of the people, even those who voted against the infrastructure bill under Biden, are peacocking about it because it's blowing all this money into their district for highways, for reservoirs, whatever. Anyway, get to the second part, which is what I think is a common problem, particularly among Democrats. And it's this, or on the left, whether it's not an organized political party. The insulin price reduction. What about the thousands of other drugs? And he's right. The negotiation for capping insulin prices and also for negotiating, I think, 10 others or 9 other medications is a fraction of all the medicines that are out there. But there was nothing before this. And this is why I will take incremental progress on something like this. There was nothing like this before. And this may be undone. You know, this Trump administration may undo all of this. But this is where you get to the, what is it, what's the enemy of the good? You know, the purity is the enemy of the good, or your ideals are standing in the way of any progress. I get it. It's not a perfect bill. It has a fraction of the environmental improvements that I would like to see, but it's something. And I know it's going to be not only opposed, but undone by any incoming Republican administration. And this just in, there is an incoming Republican administration. So kind of that's where I sit. He goes on the electorate. Big reason we lost the elections. They had no clear perception of what Biden did for them. Like, my taxes went down $2,000 under Biden, or he took on credit card companies and cut the max interest rate by half. That's what the Dems need, he says. And as long as the establishment centrist Dems stay in charge, it's not likely, so neither are election victories. I think he's right. Brad's right. We talked about that. You've got to message. You've got to peacock. You've got to advertise your victories. You have to advertise why these drug prices can be limited under this new plan that the Democrats brought you. I do think the Republicans represent so well issues that they can sell to America. And then, of course, nothing is done on them typically. I mean, I'll give you an example. They sold the fact that we're in a recession right now to the electorate by going on Fox News Channel and any other place that would have them and talking about the fact that the economy's in the worst shape it's ever been, when it's actually the leading economy in the world. And it has, by any metric, has improved so markedly that people in other nations who are involved in their economies, everything from Latin America to Europe, look at America as a victory. Still, somehow, the GOP was able to sell the fact that it was an awful economy. And since it is harder to buy a house and to rent your place, and because there has been an inflation of numbers, and an inflation of numbers at the grocery store as well. And when I say numbers, I'm talking about the cost of things. You do find an electorate that is a bit unhappy and also cynical, right? That is to say, distrustful of a lot of these governmental institutions, et cetera. So when you come forward with this message that the economy's in shambles. It's never been worse. Oh, my God, I left a good economy. Now I'm going to bring it back. People somehow swallow that. I don't think the Democrats beat that back too well. Anyway, this is it's a good note. I thank you for this. He takes me on incrementalism. You seem to be a self-proclaimed incrementalist. Consider civil rights. That was not improved by incrementalism. It was improved by people marching in the streets in dozens of cities until the government realized they had to do something quickly. I personally believe the environment will be similar. As is human nature, folks will continue to do too little until it is too late or very near too late. Then in a minute, it will all flip. In a groundswell of last-second activity, Republicans will figure out how to monetize the issue to get the oligarchs interested. And that's why I think instead of moving inches to the left with each Democratic president, before the next Republican moves us yards to the right, we need to figure out how to spark a sea change, not a wait patiently for slow change. Not easy, but a worthwhile goal, and again, it involves messaging right up to the electorate. Well, we disagree. We disagree in part. I do take incremental change, and even the civil rights progress to which you've referred was preceded, that big sea change moment of the late 60s, that was preceded by incremental change, wins in the courts, win in the cultural milieu, just the vibe that people had towards civil rights. That takes time. And so I think I don't disagree with you that I would love a sea change, but I'm also ready to take pressure in incremental change. So that's the way I see that. I guess we kind of disagree a little bit, but more on that another time. And thank you for the email. Now, there was some weird stuff associated with this election, so let me get into it.
The Mark Thompson Show.
The weird stuff, and I'll get into all the appointments, a few of them that are floated already from Donald Trump's cabinet, et cetera. Why did so many Americans not vote? Asked Gordon Andros, blue voter. That's a question for Gary Dietrich if you want to put it to the side. Of course, it was rigged. 12 million people don't just vanish, says Steve. The involvement of Elon Musk's company on election night was concerning to me. I didn't realize the extent to which Starlink was and is involved with these state elections and with tabulation of all of the vote, the way apparently Starlink is indeed involved. And Starlink, again, is a constellation of satellites, and they provide broadband and internet use across the globe. They weren't connected to any voting device. You understand that? We talked about this last week, of course, that the fact that one of the virtues of the American elections is that none of these things are attached to the internet. But, so, your ballot box is secure. Although Tony will show you a piece of video in a second that will maybe question even that. But that said, it's still possible in tabulation and in data that's shared. At some point, it has to be uploaded. That could be manipulated. So it's a little weird that these things are percolating to the surface, information about Musk's involvement and Starlink's involvement. And so to that end, Joe Rogan spoke about, who's clearly got a big hand in this. I mean, you can say what you want. Like, you can view him as he's a podcaster. Whatever. He is an extremely influential guy, Joe Rogan. And he's talking to another influential guy, and that's Theo Vaughn. And as you know, I thought Kamala Harris should have made the round on those podcasts, although I don't think it would have changed the outcome. But I don't think Democrats should be afraid of those guys. They're not guys to be afraid of. Again, as I said, I believe last week at some point, if you're not afraid of 60 Minutes, you sure as hell shouldn't be afraid of Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn. In 2 hours or whatever length of time in a conversation, it'll feel like people get to know you a bit and probably like you at the end of it. So anyway, on his show, Rogan talks about election night. Go ahead and roll it, please, Tony.
Then I was texting people like Tulsi and JD Vance. I was getting a different apparently.
Can you
Elon
play it from the
created
beginning, please? Play it from the beginning. Can you not play it from the beginning? Was that the beginning? I don't think it was.
We have two different videos, and I think that was one of better quality.
Oh,
So
okay.
was
I'm
where
sorry.
that
I'm sorry,
particular
Tony.
video
Go ahead.
started.
They're sitting
But yeah.
around on election night, and thank you. I'm sorry. I don't know really what
It
you
was
got.
interesting
Here we
because
go.
the beginning of the night, no one knew what was going to happen. So you're watching the first results roll in, and there's like this weird thing, and then Trump gets way ahead, but you don't want to like get too hopeful. Like, how far ahead he's ahead by 100 points. That seems like a lot.
Yeah, and you're like, what is it? And some channels are like, and then every channel's kind of different.
Yeah, they had different numbers. I was getting a different number off my Apple News update than I was getting off of CNN, and then I was texting people like Tulsi and JD Vance. I was getting a different apparently, Elon created an app, and he knew who won 4 hours before the results. So as the results were coming in, 4 hours before they called it, Dana White told me Elon was like, "I'm leaving. It's over. Donald won." He just fucking somehow or another.
I'm gonna go back into my pod and evaporate.
I don't know what he's getting, where he's pulling his data from, but he had like the most accurate data in terms of the rural states hadn't put the results in yet, but yet Trump was ahead in these states. Kamala's never going to win those states, so tabulated that and like put it all together. I don't know how he did it. But
Yeah.
Dana, I haven't even talked to Elon about this. I don't know like the Dana translation, but Dana said he had an app, and he was like showing him. He's like, "It's over." He fucking left. Dude just left.
It's over. John Jones won. Just saying that.
He just fucking left.
Dude.
All right. So that, again, is odd. It is odd, you'll concede, that Elon Musk would have an app that gains early access to data related to voters, don't you think?
Not one for conspiracy theories, and it makes me uneasy to even question the results of an election. But if you hear that and you think if that's true, big if, and Elon Musk knew the results 4 hours ahead of time, then he had probably access to that Starlink data. And if he had access to create an app with that data, could he have changed that data?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Again, I just want to reiterate, the way that things are set up, voter machines are generally on private communications. It's set up so that this sort of thing wouldn't be possible. But there is absolutely a drumbeat, and it's getting louder, about Elon Musk. And essentially, the notion is he'll stop at nothing to win these races. The other thing, and I will talk to Gary Dietrich about this in just a few minutes, is related to how did Democrats do well in so many states, and yet they voted for Donald Trump? How does Donald Trump win in a state where Democrats down ballot are doing well? And the answer to that may be good old-fashioned ticket splitting. It does happen. I want to talk to Dietrich about that, and when he comes on, we'll speak about that. You have the North Carolina thing. I'll show you a little bit, give you a preview of that emerging conversation. Here's a bit from North Carolina.
Breaking news in North Carolina, breaking news in the battleground states, and a strange trend I see where practically every statewide Democrat in North Carolina won overwhelmingly, and somehow Donald Trump manages to win. It doesn't make any sense, so just hear me out. Sorry, I'm losing my voice today. But we see Josh Stein, the Democrat, won for governor's race over Mark Robinson by about 800,000 votes. We see in the lieutenant governor's race, we see that a lady, Rachel Hunt, defeated Hal Wethman by 150,000 votes. We see that for attorney general, we see that Jeff Jackson defeated Dan Bishop. Same thing, another 125,000 votes. We see for the superintendent of education, Maurice Green defeated Michelle Morin. Same thing, 2,810,000 to 2,668,000. For the Secretary of State, we see another lady winning statewide, Elaine Marshall, over Chad Brown, and she wins by 120,000 votes. And then we see that Donald Trump somehow manages to win by 189,406 votes. Every other Democrat won statewide. And then this other interesting fact that doesn't make any sense, 356,884 votes were cast for president only, and they voted for not any other single office in North Carolina. Not for governor, lieutenant governor, Democrat, Republican, independent, nobody. What's up with this? This does not make sense. It doesn't make sense to me. What do you think? Does it make sense to you? Elon Musk, were you there? What do you all think? Something doesn't look right. And this trend is throughout all the battleground states. Democrats win statewide, and somehow Kamala Harris loses. Doesn't make sense. And many of them are women winning in these states.
Yeah, that last point isn't completely incidental, right? So it's not like, well, just people won't vote for a woman. He's saying, you know, women are winning in all of these different races statewide, and all of a sudden they punch it for Donald Trump. It is curious. The math ain't mathin', says Kevin. The hashtag do not concede Kamala was trending this week. More than 650,000 mentions, almost 651,000 mentions by Friday. And
you can retract a concession.
Yeah, so of course that's true. Yeah,
you can.
Yeah,
but you know what? One of the things he said, and maybe he's talking about statewide races, but what we know is that the Republicans took control of the Senate, right? It really looks like they're about to take control of the House, and now the executive branch. So they did win, you know, most of their seats.
They win by a sliver. Let's be clear about that.
True.
I mean, the breaking news, and it is significant, is that Donald Trump won the popular vote, but he did win it by a sliver. It was not this overwhelming win. But, I mean, Republicans don't win the popular vote, aside from, you know, the George Bush exception. But Dino Badala, who does a show on Sirius, he said, I'd sincerely recommend that Biden's administration, while Biden has absolute immunity, have his... I'm laughing because that's always Kim's thing. Why doesn't Biden, if he's got absolute immunity, why does he go down to Mar-a-lago and storm in? And, you know, it's got that. She's always got a plan. Because
if democracy is really at risk, you take the opportunity to save America. Use your immunity.
I would sincerely recommend, while Biden has absolute immunity, that he has his DHS work with state officials to examine the election results in key states. That would help alleviate concerns that Trump and Elon Musk somehow cheated to win. This investigation needs to conclude well before the electors vote in each state on December 17th to cast their ballots in the Electoral College. So that isn't happening right now, to our knowledge. But I do think some kind of reasonable investigation is just that, reasonable. And I don't know why that can't happen. But it's odd that the right, as represented by Jim Jordan, for example, now feels that this is a free and fair election, yet the last one he said was stolen. So we're confronted with that. He was on CNN yesterday. He was asked, what about this? You saw it, didn't you, Kim? He was asked, what about this election? He said, I think it was fair and a legitimate election. And then what did he say? And then the Dana Bash said, well, what do you think about the 2020? Are you ready to concede that that was also a fair election? And what did he say?
He kind of hemmed and hawed and had to admit that 2020 was a free and fair election as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, again, yeah, it went. Here it is. You got it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It seems to me the Republicans claim voting fraud when you lose and not when you win. He said, Jim Jordan did. No, this election was the greatest political comeback we've ever seen. Bash. Why was 2024 different from 2020 when Trump lost? And he said, well, there were concerns about 2020 with all the mail-in voting. That's what he said.
As if there wasn't mail-in voting this time.
Yeah, it's just, anyway, he's
Let's see it. I think we have the video of it, right?
Yeah, it was a Twitter embed. It should be, or an X embed. You got it, Tony? Real quick, and then we'll get to
Republicans claim
Gary.
voting fraud and election integrity when you lose and not when you win.
No, I mean, again, as I said before, this election, I think, was the greatest political comeback we've ever seen. I mean, he did something that even Teddy Roosevelt couldn't do, for goodness sake. And the country.
But you think it was a free and fair election?
No. This election, you just interviewed the Latino, I think, restaurant owner or a restaurant worker, and he said he was tired of all the woke stuff. This election was real simple. You had back-to-back administrations. We got something we very seldom get in American history, American politics. Back-to-back administrations now running for the top job, and people could do a direct comparison. And they said, we like what we had under President Trump versus.
But last time around,
we like the safe streets versus the record
last
crime.
time around, your leader claimed that there were problems with
secure
fraud.
border versus the open border.
Right, those are policies.
That's what this election was about.
That's totally fair. But last time around, it wasn't so much about the policy differences or the personality differences. There were false claims about election fraud when Donald Trump lost. This time, Donald Trump won, and you think the election was free and fair. Do you see there's a little bit of a...
No, I think the Democrats got to ask, why did
there?
we go from getting 81 million to getting 70 million? What happened to those 10 million people? Maybe they needed. Maybe it's not smart to run an election where you have no vision, no record to run on.
Do you believe
that
the 2024
names?
Do you believe that the 2024 election was free and fair?
I do.
And why was it different from 2020 when he lost? Is that the only difference?
No, there were concerns about 2020 with all the mail-in voting that happened. You know, Pennsylvania had like 2-point-something million mail-in ballots come in without any signature verification, which was required under Pennsylvania statute. So there were all kinds of concerns with how the 2020 election was carried out. But
there was absolutely
the biggest question Democrats need to be asking, what happened to the 10 million voters that Joe Biden got that didn't come out for Kamala Harris? A bunch of them. President Trump's numbers were right up where they were in 2020, but the Democrats were much lower. I think it's because they had no vision, no record to run on, and they just wanted to call everyone names. Turns out when you tell people, oh, you're fascist, racist, deplorable garbage, they don't like that. And then when you use lawfare to go after their candidate, they don't like that either.
Well,
that's why they came out. So on top of the economy, on top of the price of gas, on top of the inflation, that's why they voted for President Trump.
We're out of time. I just want to say, for the record, that there was no evidence of widespread fraud in 2020. It went through many, many different court cases. And I do think the name calling,
that's what I was concerned about.
The name calling was very strong on the Republican side of the aisle from the former president, and you know that. So thank you for being here. Appreciate you.
Yeah. I got to give her some credit. I mean, she kind of does push back on him, which is nice. But look, we know what's going on, which is why because Democrats always play between the lines and are very concerned about the institutions of governments and a government not breaking anything. They don't really want to make a big deal out of the fact that there might be some irregularities in this election that did or did not exist in the last one, because they so poo-pooed irregularities being mentioned in the last election. And it's fair what she says. They were not just irregularities that were mentioned, they were litigated. I mean, they brought them to courts around the country with no evidence. They were unable to move it. You couldn't have spent more time and money and political capital on that issue, and they were never able to really bring it with evidence. In this case, might there be some evidence? Might there be some fragments on this particular election? Vilma says Kamala Harris stated that when we fight, we win. The problem was we didn't fight. The only way to beat a bully is to fight a bully. We didn't fight. Well, the messaging, as you know, I feel was flawed. I do want to ask Gary Dietrich about this because this is a real thing. Mark, you just don't get it. Daddy's home, and he's going to fix absolutely everything. I live in a country with millions of idiots, and no messaging can help. I mean, it is possible. I mean, but, there's always been in this country 30 to 35% idiots. To be fair, you don't win an election with just on idiots. You can't tell me that it's just idiots who voted for Donald Trump. I mean, it was more than that. I believe some of the idiocy falls to the Democrats who didn't message well. I mean, as I've told you, you've got to advertise your successes, So Anyway, I've got Gary Dietrich waiting, but I'm going to ask him about this and more. And I will start with the election conspiracy stuff because I think it is intriguing. So thank you for all the ways you contribute to the conspiracy conversation and also to just the conversation generally. You're welcome in the chat. You're welcome after hours. You know, after the show, we are a live show every day, but clearly most people take the show in after hours. Please add your thoughts in comments, and I will respond or certainly read all those comments, and you can always email me at themarkthompsonshow@gmail.com. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
Well, this is our longtime colleague, and has he been busy? Terrific to carve out Mondays for us. He is the political analyst across the CBS television stations and also across iHeart Radio. How about it for the great Gary Dietrich, everyone? Hey, Gary.
Hey, Mark.
Let me
a little bit delayed, but good to talk to you on the so-called morning after, at least my morning after with you, Mark.
Yes, it's true. We haven't had a chance to speak since the election. So let me start with the wild stuff, okay? I mean, obviously, this election was, I think with the exception of the vaunted Iowa poll, which we heard, oh, she's the best. You've never heard another a pollster like her. She's so good. That was the one that was most off, I think. But otherwise, the pollsters were right in the sense that, this election came down to a sliver. But we'll get back to that in a second. I want you to address or just button out what we've been talking about, which is associated with a conspiracy of some kind, the involvement of Starlink, the involvement of Elon Musk. The Musk agenda is so clear and unapologetic, and he really took over X as a propaganda platform for Trump and the right. And it's not a big leap to think that with Starlink's involvement, there can be a credible narrative crafted about how he might have actually influenced the outcome. So I'll shut up in a second, but I just wanted to kind of just establish against that background, these things are coming forward. Explain to us how Democrats and women who are Democrats, because Kamala Harris is a woman and there might be an aversion to voting for a woman and all this sort of thing, did well in so many states that Donald Trump still carried top of ticket. Explain that bifurcation, that disparity. Democrats do well in a state, but Trump still wins it. Explain ticket splitting and all of that.
Yeah. Well, one of the things about this election that's become clear, Mark, was that some of the assumptions going in, even by both parties themselves and certainly by pollsters, turned out to at least not be completely true, or not. Maybe another side of the coin is not true enough. What do I mean by that? Like the margins, for example, for Latinos. It wasn't just African Americans. It wasn't just young Black and Latino males that Trump did better on than he did in 2020. It was across the board with those demographics. The same with women, by the way. You know what I mean? And I think it's this wholesale increase when you only have one state, the state of Washington, who Harris did better than Biden did in 2020. That's a wholesale reckoning. And I think that's part of what's still settling in about how could Trump possibly win so big, Mark, across so many demographics and so many states, including blue states. I mean, when you come as close as he did even in a state like New Jersey, that is a major league wake-up call. And I think that's what I think Democrats are particularly grappling with now, today, and will going forward is, okay, if we didn't pick up as much of the female vote or this, that, but it's the wholesale across the board that I think is really causing the consternation. And now, of course, as happens in every election, as happened with the Republicans after they've lost some major elections, the internal reckoning is happening, and the finger pointing, and how could this possibly happen?
I'm going to get to the politics because I think you can play that reckoning thing from two perspectives, and I'm really anxious to hear your thoughts. Tony, before I leave the conspiracy stuff aside, play for Gary Dietrich that video of the FedEx driver. Do you have it? And I think that this is sort of, again, all of these little things pile up to make the case for, hey, what happened here? So you can again contextualize. Go ahead, Tony. Just hit. So a driver finds a box of early voting ballots in the middle of the road. Okay, and there they are. They show them to you. All right. It feels so 2020 what I'm doing right now, but nonetheless, these are actual ballots. And as it turns out, this is in Miami-Dade County. Initially, he thought they were garbage. The driver said he took them to a police station. I'm just reading for those who are listening. The bag and the seals were intact. Nothing was tampered with. It was. It seems like the incident was an accident. The worker who was transporting the ballot was terminated, according to Miami-Dade County Elections Department. That is that. There's going to be that kind of thing that we're going to see in every election.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can go back. We all focus on 2020, of course, but the most famous of all is Florida, Gore v. Bush,
sure,
538 hanging Chads. I mean that's was this Chad hanging? Was it not hanging? I mean, every election cycle there's some of them. It's just that, of course, last cycle, the claim that there was a scale and a scope and a size to swing the election. That, of course, as you pointed out, Mark, was never proven by the Republicans. But in every election cycle, you use the word, you can use irregularities, you can use whatever you want. That happens whenever you're casting 150 million plus ballots. Things are going to happen. Do they happen to the point where an election has been materially affected? So far in American history, we don't have any evidence of that. Now, Republicans would claim that Chicago in 1964 might have violated that, but 1960, but that's neither here nor there. I mean, the fact is, Mark, there's irregularities. Yes. Have some of them been demonstrated? Yes. Enough to swing an election? So far, no.
Well, the recounts that have been demanded or the investigations that have been demanded, they should follow, right? I mean,
absolutely. I mean, regardless of party, look, we have to take a step back from whether people loved or hated Trump, loved or hated Harris. We want an election process that people believe in, right? That has institutional integrity. So after every election, irregularities should be investigated. Things should be gotten to the bottom of. I don't care whether it's for a little tiny township race, clear up to the presidency. That's important. It's important that people believe in the process. And I think that's absolutely vital.
It's said by Dorian, if Elon Musk has something to do with the voting machines, it's going to come out one way or another. And again, as I mentioned, Starlink was linked to the data collection. Again, not the voting. The machines are completely separated. They're not connected to the internet in any way. That should give people a lot of confidence in the system. But then when you get to data transfer and tabulation, you do get into internet-related concerns that might go back to Musk. Now, I want to quickly pivot to the strategy and the framework that you can put this election in. We were talking about the fact that Democrats have to sit down and really look at their message, look at their philosophy moving forward. They may have to change their appeal, although, as I have noted here, I mean, they're the ones who actually have done things, I think, for the working man, to use the oft-used phrase. In fact, you have a president who walked the picket line in Detroit with striking auto workers. I mean, Donald Trump set up a photo op with a bunch of auto workers who weren't unionized. They weren't on strike. They were paid to be there. So you have these, again, the strength of messaging, of advertising, and then the courage of your convictions, minus the advertising. Again, I have an expressed bias. I'm not a Trump fan, but more to the point, how much do they really have to sit down and change their positions or change what they feel? In other words, should they go more moderate? Should they go more left? Should they go? And how much of it is, hey, they just kind of barely lost if you actually look at the numbers. And maybe it's a question of messaging, of advertising, of controlling a little bit more in the way you tell people what you do.
Yeah, well, I think, Mark, you can kind of divide elections up into three pieces, okay? One is sort of the facts on the ground. What are the realities, Like, do we have inflation since 4 years ago? Yes. Is it about in total and aggregated about 20%? Of just real average in terms of grocery prices? Yes. So you have some sort of basic realities that you have to deal with. Then secondly is the policies that you've used or haven't used to address those, right? What are you going to do then about that? Or let's throw another big one in there, immigration. Did we have millions of people come across the border in the last 4 years? Yes. What was the size and scope of that? People can debate about that. Then the question becomes, okay, so what did you do about that over the course of that term? And then finally, the last thing about it is, I guess I would call it the product. You know what I mean? It's sort of like, okay, so how are you going to message then what those facts were, what you did or didn't do about it to help communicate that reality to people? And all three of those pieces, interestingly, Democrats are now looking at. You know, like, did we have an immigration problem or didn't we? Right? Did we have realities, you know, in terms of price increases and economic stuff like that? Yeah, well, some of those favored Democrats, some of them clearly didn't. But I think where Harris and Biden got stuck initially, you know, before you get into the messaging part of it, was in the policy thing. How do you explain how you did or did not address those? And as you know, Mark, she struggled with that. She really struggled with that. You know, okay, so what have you done and what are you going to do to address prices? Well, we're going to go after, we're going to go after price gouging with grocery stores. Well, you know, then the obvious question was, how come you didn't do that in the last 4 years? And then, of course, the one that really tripped her up, what would you do differently than President Biden going forward? And she really struggled with that question. And then finally, on that messaging component, the third piece of every campaign, you know, there too, you know, it seemed like they had a hard time getting traction on issues that in the end, and we talked about this several times, Mark, over the last several months, you know, the thing about democracy and all, that's fine. But that was not the top 3 or 4 issues for people, right? It was the economy / inflation. It was immigration. It was abortion, right? Those were the top 3 at all the polls. And except for the third one, she really had trouble getting policy positions and messaging that ultimately people would move the needle in the ballot box.
Yeah. I never believed in the democracy thing. I never thought that from a political standpoint was really just going to cut through. It's too amorphous an idea. It's too, and no one believes it's going to happen. We all just, because we're Americans, we're fat and happy. Yeah, I know, democracy is going to be a fascism. Right. You know, it's Monday Night Football tonight, so who's playing? I mean, that's sort of our general disposition as Americans. I think we've gotten very used to this system, and we kind of feel it's bulletproof in a sense. So I never liked the democracy thing. I always liked the fact that you talked about, and you've talked repeatedly about the fact that, you know, that's the thing that the Dems keep talking about, and while it may be true, it is not the thing that cuts through. It's not the thing that makes everybody's to-do list for top of the list. They had over 3 years to figure out a hack. Musk didn't hang around for nothing. A woman in Australia threw ballots in the trash because she wanted Trump to win and was arrested. I mean, there is all of this stuff. The stuff that percolates both through our conversation and through the ashes of this election as the Democrats look over it, it'll always include this kind of thing. Talk to me about the actual votes. Gary Dietrich, when you look at the votes, do they make sense? 10 million fewer people showed up for Kamala Harris, for example, than did for Joe Biden? Yeah.
Well, the 10 million number is going to be the interesting one, Mark, because Trump's actual votes, you compare 2020, I was looking at that just this morning. It's remarkable that his vote count is almost identical. What I mean, but I'm saying several 100,000 different, right? But 75 million roughly and change. Now, we don't have all of California counted yet. There's a big chunk yet to come in. Hers dropped about 10 million from Biden. Now, is that a believable figure? Well, I think if you look at what people were talking about the enthusiasm gap amongst Democrats, especially amongst key demographics, working class folks / union people, when you started hearing, Mark, from people like the Teamsters, that 60 to 65% of their members in their own internal balloting, you know, their own internal polling, 65% said they were going to vote for Trump. That was a huge red flag for Democrats. Same thing with young Black, young Latino voters, particularly males, and even amongst female voters, they did not turn out as strongly as initial polling said they might for Harris. So it was that massive drop off, and probably a lot of them not necessarily voting for Trump because Trump's numbers stayed the same. But Democrats are saying now, Mark, our people, too many of them, stayed home.
Yeah, this is a thing that has to be viewed in context, I feel, which is when you look back at the Trump years when he was president, the end of his term was marked by the chaos that really, in my judgment, informed his entire stay there in the White House, but it really was amped up like crazy by COVID, right? So you have people dying, you have, this disorganized craziness with whether or not you're going to get the personal protective equipment. It was state by state. It was like a Hunger Games setup, like who's actually going to get what they need. It was just an absolute mess. Meanwhile, people aren't working. They're being told to get vaccines. They're being told to stay home. Schools are closed, reopened, closed, etc. So it's a mess. So Biden comes in, and there's no transition. Trump won't meet with him, et cetera, and he pulls it together. I think the guy deserves some credit for that. But the reason he comes in, I'd suggest to you, is because people were responding to that chaos, and that's why they showed up in such immense numbers at the ballot box. Out of this 4-year period, you don't have that chaos, and so Trump was able to energize his people. And the Harris people to whom you've just referred, like the 10 million fewer that you've just talked about, they just weren't motivated, probably because this election didn't really take place amidst the kind of chaos that I just described. Does that hold water?
Yeah, well, Mark, I think that's certainly going to be one of the threads, the themes, like how was the context this time around different than the last time? So I think there's some validity to that. But there is another concern just about candidates. I mean, and all of a sudden in the last few days, Nancy Pelosi, man, I tell you, there's going to be no Thanksgiving invitations between the Pelosi and the Biden household anytime in the near future, okay? I mean, what she started saying in the last few days, well, you know what, if Joe had just gotten out earlier, wow. I mean, what is she trying to, the point she's trying to make? This, to me, I think is going to be one of the most interesting postmortems of this, politically speaking, is that Kamala Harris never ran a campaign nationally. She dropped out of the primary, remember, in 2020, before the first one. She'd never gotten somebody to actually put a mark next to her name. Does that make any sense? Establish any candidate loyalty, personal affinity. People would say brand loyalty. Yeah, they voted for Biden in 2020. Famously, people, the pollsters, all the exit polls show this forever and ever, amen. People vote for the top of the ticket, not for the VP. So she had to, in 3 months' time, try to establish some sort of momentum, candidate loyalty that was something other than I hate Donald Trump. And I think that was a huge challenge. And I think that's part of what Pelosi's trying to get at.
Yeah, that's really interesting, the Pelosi thing. There's probably truth to it, right, Gary? I mean, for just the reasons you've suggested, had there actually been a primary, had Biden actually just been the 4-year president, you would have had, I think, Kamala Harris primaried out. I don't believe I've never been a Kamala Harris fan particularly. I certainly, as I've said before, I'd vote for my cat before I'd vote for Donald Trump. But I do think that her viability as a candidate was never really tested in the ways that you described. So tell me where we go from here. For Democrats, they may not take the House. I mean, likely looks as though they're going to be sitting this one out. So you've got a president with a radical, aggressive agenda, in my judgment, and he's put in people who are loyalists to him. That seems to be the Nikki Haley's of the world. They're not going to have a role in a Trump administration. And the Democrats are really limited in terms of what they can do. I'd love you to mention also, if you would, these appointments that Trump has already asked Republican senators to be party to, that sort of has both a political side and a kind of a working congressional side. You can explain how it works. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, real quick on the appointment process. Trump wants that appointment process to be expedited. Why? Because he knows very well that he's basically got 2 years before midterms, and I'm going to come to that in a second. I want to give our Democratic friends some glimmers of hope. All right. So those are coming, friends. Hang in there. All right. So, but on the political side and the appointment process, this becomes exceptionally important. Getting your people in place to move a policy agenda in the first 12 months. And Trump does not want to be spending 6 to 9 months on appointments. He wants to move on that policy right away, and so do Republicans. So that's the appointment side. They want to move that through. Now, for Democrats, where do they go from here? All right, there's still a lot of, licking the wounds and all, understandably. But the people inside the Democratic Party that are real activists, they're like go-getters on this, are already saying, okay, where do we go now, this week and going forward? Here's a couple things. Number one, they have the filibuster in the Senate. Yes, they're going to be down, looks like maybe as many as 6 seats, but they have the filibuster. Now, people have decried that back and forth. McConnell says he would never do away with that. The incoming Senate leadership looks like they're going to take that is Republican leadership, going to take a similar position. So that will be the immediate backstop that Democrats will have. Lock things up in the Senate when they feel like they need to. That's number one. Secondly, they'll be looking at the midterm election immediately. Okay, the House majority, you're right, it looks like Republicans are going to take the House. It won't be by a big margin. It might be 5-6 seats again. Okay, who knows? The bottom line is Democrats will say, let's target those districts that we know we can get or think we can get in the midterm. Traditionally, as you know, Mark, historically, the party in power in the White House loses typically seats in the midterms. That's where they'll look next. Thirdly, the Senate map in the midterm election in 2 years is much more favorable to Democrats than this one was. There'll be many more Republican seats that they have to defend, so they'll be looking at that as well. And then finally, yes, make no mistake about it, the campaign bus was warmed up here in Sacramento for Gavin Newsom, and it only took 48 hours. He called the special session in California. I'm sure we'll be talking about that in the coming weeks. And, he's centered himself as sort of like, the Luke Skywalker, the champion of the resistance movement against Trump. He, Shapiro, these other names you've heard in the past, Gretchen Whitmer, that 2028 bus is already pulling out of the station, and it will be picking up speed in the months ahead.
It would be hard for me to believe that the Democrats wouldn't win in 2028 because Trump's administration is going to be a mess. I hope we survive it. I hope the government survives it. These are my opinions, not yours, of course. But I think I have a very bleak view of where we're going to end up at the end of a Trump administration, which means that Democrats, just like the last administration with Trump, will, I think, be motivated to show up, and even crossover voters will be motivated to show up. So that bus that you're talking about that's pulling out, I would think it would get some serious velocity. All right, so as we look at the days ahead, literally, I've noticed the Biden administration, they pulled out of this climate meeting that they were going to, didn't pull out. I just don't think that, I think the plan was for Biden to be there, and now it's not. These things that seem to underpin a lot of what their policy was, they kind of die on the vine because of just this, you can see this coming wave that's just essentially going to wash them all out.
Well, I think that, it would, in the view of the Biden people now, it would look foolish to go and say, I'm going to advance an American policy when, in 60 days, that's going to be completely different. So I just think there's almost a face-saving part of that of like, look, this doesn't make any sense for us to go and try to be major players in something when we're going to have a wholesale change in our administration. If Harris had won, that would be totally different.
Were you surprised by anything else in this election when it comes to the popular vote? I mean, that was one of the big surprises for me. I really felt that he had a good shot to win the Electoral College, but I was astounded that he wins the popular vote. Was there anything on your radar that you didn't necessarily think would be there?
Yeah, well, I think you really hit on it for me, Mark. I was really on edge towards the end about people, of course, wanting me to put my dime down. Is it going to be Trump? Is it going to be Harris? I mean, it looked so neck and neck. But you made a point in the early part of this interview, Mark, that I think was really important. All the really sharp, prognosticator types, the Nate Cohen's of the world, the others, the Silvers, said, look, all we need is a couple of percentage point one way or the other, and all of those dominoes in the swing states could fall one direction. And that's exactly what happened. But it was the popular vote. And then, again, something I said earlier, 49 states moving in Trump's favor, only one in the Democrats' favor. That is the state of Washington. The wholesale across the board, Trump did better with almost every single demographic. How many counties, if you look at that New York Times map, how many counties moved red versus moved blue? nationally speaking. I think it was the size and scope of the movement politically. That is what has shocked Democrats, and that actually surprised me as well.
A quick question. Randy has asked Dietrich about majority of Muslim voters in Michigan voting for Jill Stein. Can you speak to that?
Well, I think that was a protest vote. There's no question about it. You know, they weren't huge Trump fans in the sense that they're concerned about Trump's stance on Israel, et cetera, but they just could not. I mean, you know, they had their protest vote, as you know, in the primaries. And they said, look, we are not going to support a Biden-Harris administration, given what we feel like you folks have done to not take a more aggressive stance. And so I think the Stein vote and to some degree the Trump vote was clearly a protest. We're not going to be taken for granted. And that certainly did not help her in places like Michigan.
And then to button us out, just so you know, it's out there. There is this from the Constant Gardener in caps. Trump's base was stagnant for almost 10 years, and he lost the popular vote twice. Suddenly he wins the popular vote in all swing states? No, I don't think so. So the conspiracy theories live on. Gary, you're the best. Thank you so much for being part of our conversation today. I don't know what's ahead. I think it could be kind of a rocky ride, but I'm looking forward to talking about it with you. Thanks a lot, pal.
Thanks, Mark.
Gary Dietrich, everybody. Loving that. And Gary Dietrich is brought to us by Bill Campbell at Remax Gold. In fact, Bill is terrific, particularly in Northern California. If you need a highly respected real estate professional, if you're relocating in or leaving, check out Bill Campbell, Remax Gold. Call or text him 530-448-7474, 530-448-7474. Bill Campbell at Remax Gold. Right on.
The Mark Thompson Show.
We are in the middle of our Monday show. We're still going through the ashes of the election. And as I mentioned to you at the start of the show, for me, there are a lot of different ways in which the people's voice is suppressed. The latest conspiracy theories that have been associated with Elon Musk involve the technological reach, essentially, of Starlink manipulating data, etc. The tried and true way to suppress the people's voice is by making it harder for them to vote. And voter suppression has been taken to a high art in many of these states, like Georgia, for example, is just probably head of that parade. And when it comes to talking about that and the ways in which voter rolls are shed of Democratic voters in this case, that's the, as I say, tried and true, baked in way that you can, conspiracy theorists, you can sink your teeth into a narrative. And the guy who is without peer when it comes to bringing light to voter suppression, the aggressive shedding of voters from the voter rolls, is this guy right here. So glad we got him. Love his books. I love his reporting. I love his latest movie. How about it for Greg Palast, everybody? Greg, what a week you had. I know you were really doing some real-time reporting on what was happening with voter disenfranchisement. Can you give us an update, on what happened a bit? Just bring us up to speed, and then where that all stands now.
Well, Mark, it involves millions of voters. I mean, I don't think we understand in America how much what we politely call vote suppression, which is a fancy word for saying screwing people of color out of their vote, which is what it really comes down to. So, and I'm talking millions of votes. You know, for those who don't know me, Greg Palast, I'm a reporter for BBC Television and the Guardian newspapers out of England. And one thing we do in BBC is that when we announce the vote, we say so many, 1,000 votes for Labor, 1,000 votes for Conservatives, and then we say how many votes weren't counted. Well, we don't do that in America for good reason, because the number of votes we don't counted is in the millions. And so, for example, so I have just put out a film, Vigilantes, Inc., America's Vote Suppression Hitmen. Now, We have an organization called True the Vote, which is backed by Donald Trump. They did the film 2000 Mules. He released it from Mar-a-Lago. He's been a big promoter of their work. But what people don't know is their main work is to challenge the right of voters to vote. Now, this may sound odd, but in America, unlike every other developed country in the world, anyone can challenge the vote of someone else in 43 states. This is left over from Jim Crow. So for example, in Georgia, we had one single woman, a Republican operative working for Marjorie Taylor Greene. One single woman challenged 32,000 voters. Another Republican official is the Republican chairman for in Southern Georgia, a guy named Alton Russell. He personally challenged 4,000 voters. Now, who are these voters? Almost all of them were black soldiers out of Fort Benning, Georgia, where he's chairman of the Republican Party there. One is named Gamaliel Turner, Major Gamaliel Turner. Now, Major Turner, yes, there's that film, Vigilantes, Inc. Major Turner was waiting for his vote. He was assigned to a base in California. There he is at Fort Hueneme in front of one of the jets there. He was assigned. He's 70 years old, career military, African-American, and he was assigned to California. And so this Republican Party operative challenged his vote and 4,000 others, almost all of them black soldiers out of Fort Benning, Georgia. This is no joke. Now you'd say, well, okay, that's a few votes. No, it ain't. True the Vote, as of August 5th, had already challenged 852,000 citizens. Now, these aren't government officials that are doing the challenging. These are individual vigilantes, self-proclaimed vote fraud hunters.
And this is
and
your
they
point.
Took they challenged all together by election day. They challenged, as my producer Martin Sheen says, they challenged 2 million voters. This has not been reported on. The New York Times, Washington Post did some little stories about, oh yeah, there's these challenges there. If you're watching this on your not just listening, but there is a woman in a red dress, Republican Party official, who personally challenged 32,000 people. I'm showing her a photo of a black woman, a neighbor of hers, who she challenged 32,379 voters. That's just the beginning.
And
so
it's perfectly legal. Yeah. And that the way we're set up, that's perfectly legal. That one
well,
person.
It may be legal. I mean, here's, according to the NAACP, Gerald Griggs, the president of the NAACP, is in my film. And by the way, you can download my film, or you can stream my film, Vigilantes, Inc., America's New Vote Suppression Hitmen, at gregpalast.com or saveyourvote.org. So go to gregpalast.com. You can stream it for free. Thank you, Leonardo DiCaprio, who made this available for free.
I mean, it's a great movie that showcases your reporting, and where there's going to be a link to it under this video and under the show as well. Yeah. So go ahead.
So that's just one way. 2 million voters were challenged. 2 million, almost all of them voters of color.
But explain to us, Greg Palast, what happens. So they're challenged. How do they end up in a trash heap?
Well, this is what happened. Okay, first of all, you have to understand, you think, well, what the hell is this? These people aren't government officials. Who are they to challenge voters? Well, we have leftover Jim Crow laws. Last time this mass challenge of voters was occurred was 1946. 1946, that's more than a half century ago, when the Ku Klux Klan mounted a challenge of almost all the black voters of Georgia, and they elected a Klansman as governor. Now, here's the interesting thing. At that time, in 46, the Justice Department and the FBI moved to indict the governor of Georgia, who had won his election. He was a Klansman who won through this trickery of challenging voters. And they were about to arrest him, but he drank himself to death just before the FBI arrived to handcuff him. Now, here's the weird thing. That was 1946. It was considered illegal by the Justice Department in 1946. And yet the 1946 Klan plan became the Trump plan of 2024, and nothing has happened to stop this. That's just one of the ways that vote suppression has worked here. And I'm telling you, that was 2 million votes. Now, what happens when you are challenged? Either you walk away and say, well, I don't have the right to vote. You show up to vote. And by the way, if you've mailed in your ballot, it won't get counted. About 60, I want to emphasize this. This is not small. About 60% of the American public votes early or by mail. Over half the American population votes that way. You mail in your vote and you've been challenged by a vigilante, you won't know it and your vote goes in the garbage. If you show up to vote, they may hand you something that they call a provisional ballot. Now, what is a provisional ballot? I call it a placebo ballot. The lady behind the desk says, oh, just fill out this form and your ballot will count. And they'll go through it, find your registration, your ballot will count. No, it won't. If you're not on the registration rolls, you're not on the registration rolls, and you can fill out 92 provisional ballots. They won't count. They won't count.
I did not know that. That's extraordinary. I've had that happen. I've filled it out where they didn't, because of some glitch in the system, because I've changed residency.
Your vote didn't count. Your vote went in the garbage, my friend. So here's what happens. Here's what happens with a provisional ballot. According to the United States Elections Assistance Commission, which is our federal agency which tracks these things, 4 years ago, there were 10 million people shunted to provisional ballots. 10 million, like you. 2.7 million, 1 out of 4 of those ballots, more than 1 out of 4 of those ballots, 2.7 million ballots, almost about a third, were never counted, thrown in the garbage, thrown in the dumpster. 2.7 million voters. Now, here's the interesting thing, Mark. If these were illegal voters, why don't you arrest them? You know, if I rob a bank, they don't close my bank account. They put me in prison. So if someone, now voting illegally, if you've registered to vote illegally, if you know, like they claim that there are aliens voting and, you know, people swimming the Rio Grande to vote for Kamala Harris, whatever, that, you know, if that's true, then arrest them. I'm not in favor of vote fraud, but they, you know how many other 2.7 million people were arrested for illegally attempting to register a vote? Out of 2.7 million, how many do you think were arrested for that crime of illegal voting?
I know the answer because I know your stuff. Yeah, it was 1,
0.
right? Oh, 0. Well, didn't they find one, somebody from Austria or something, Greg Palast?
Oh, yes. There was about back 8, it was 12 years ago, in 2000, 12 years ago. There was, in Florida, there was one Austrian who registered as a Republican and voted in 2008.
Yeah, illegally, right.
Voted illegally for McCain. So there was one single voter, a Republican. That was it from Australia. Out of, again, in 4 years ago, it was 2.7 million voters rejected for voting illegally. All you have to, hey, I'm just asking you to find 2 of those people who voted illegally. Instead, now, if it were random, by the way, Mark, if it were random,
sure,
hey, who would care? You know, I mean, but the truth is, if you're Black, Hispanic, Asian American, your chance that you will be shunted to provisional ballot is 300% higher than if you're white. And if your ballot is ultimately rejected for some reason, if you're Black, the chance your ballot will not count. We don't talk about this in America. Ballot's not counting. The chance of your ballot being disqualified is 700% higher if you're Black than if you're white. That's the official government figures. So we're talking about, we're not talking about a few votes. We're talking about millions. Now, did that flip this election? I got to tell you, if for those watching on TV, I've got, or on your video, I've got this fedora on, which indicates that I'm an investigative reporter. And I cannot report unless I've investigated. I'm trying now to get the numbers of ballots that were rejected, of the people shunted to provisional ballots in each state. It's just very, very difficult. I can tell you right now, when I'm at BBC, we tell you how many ballots were not counted. In America, we keep that secret because in Britain, it's a couple hundred in the entire nation, a few hundred in the entire nation where ballots were unreadable and spoiled. In America, it's millions and millions. So I just told you 2.7 million provisional ballots were thrown in the dumpster. We got about 1.5 million ballots. About 1.5 million ballots, what they call spoiled. Now, Mark, you don't spoil a vote by leaving it out of the fridge. You spoil a vote because they say it's unreadable. Again, if you're black, it's 700% more likely your vote will be in that spoilage dumpster. And it's not a small amount. It's about 1.5 million votes. We also have the massive purge of voter rolls. There are about 24 million people who were removed last year, in the last couple of years, purged from the voter rolls. Now, some of those are dead. Some have moved. Some have changed. But I got to tell you this. In Georgia alone, when they removed 500,000 voters from the voter rolls, I asked Amazon. And remember, Amazon knows where you live, Mark. You don't get someone else's tidy whities. Right. Mark Thompson is a common name, but you know that you don't get someone else's stuff. They don't get yours. And so Amazon knows where you live. They use 1,800 data points to make sure that you live where you live. So we asked Amazon, the Palast Fund, their experts, if they would go through the list of 500,000 voters removed just in Georgia. And they gave me back a list with the names and addresses. This is not guessing. They went through every single name. They said 340,134 people. That's 1/3 people were removed from the rolls wrongly, that they still live exactly at their voting address. Overwhelmingly, these are voters of color. And I'm just looking at one state, and I did this in Wisconsin. I asked the Amazon people to look at the people purged in Wisconsin. 130,000 were facing a purge. And they said, well, about 35,000 of these people. And again, they weren't guessing. They're giving me the names and addresses of each and every one of the people wrongly removed. And in Wisconsin, swing state, they said 1/3 of the people removed from the voter rolls still live at their voting address. And guess what? I worked with the Washington Post. And they did a map for me, and they showed that the people removed wrongly from the voter rolls, almost every one of them were in one of two places, either Milwaukee, the black voting precincts of Milwaukee, and it was an exact match. We had a map, exact match. Black voters in Milwaukee were removed from the voter rolls, and students in Madison, Wisconsin. Did that make the difference in Wisconsin? Likely, but I don't know. I'm right now. I'm going to tell you again. I'm a reporter. I can't without. The states are hiding these facts. I actually have had to go to federal court to get this data. But once I get it, I'll come back and report. But it looks like it made the difference in Wisconsin. Looks like it made the difference in Georgia. I don't know what other states it made the difference in. Likely Arizona, likely Nevada, where we had massive voter disenfranchisement. Again, I'm not guessing. I use the U.S. government statistics. I go to federal court to get these things. But all I want to tell you is that Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, these are states where I really doubt whether Donald Trump won those states with voters or won those states through suppressing the vote.
So the suppression of the vote, as I was saying, is one instrument. I mean, it's a tried and true instrument. And the other is this other thing. It's Shadow Producer Calvin wants 340,000 people wrongly removed from voting in Georgia. That's a damn crime. And that's exactly what Greg Palast is saying. It is a damn crime. And then it coexists this time round with this involvement of Elon Musk in our vote. And I know that this is not your world is really hunting down, as you say, the X's and O's and actually the heavy lifting associated with voters being shed from the rolls. So this is not, but as long as I have you, I mean, it does involve voting in the way we're doing things in the modern age. And so the involvement of Starlink and the transfer of data and Musk, who clearly had an agenda in this election, Dennis says, who provided the master database to True the Vote, who then petitioned it and sent it out to all 50 states, and who is the source of funding? I mean,
yes.
Is there a there, Greg Palast?
Yes, indeed. Well, we know that with True the Vote, which came up with these hit lists, they came up, again, they proudly announced that by August 5, they'd already challenged 852,000 voters with the goal of 2 million by Election Day. I'm sure they got close to it. Now, who funds them? There is something called the Bradley Foundation out of Milwaukee, this ultra right-wing family, which shut down all their factories in Milwaukee, sold out to Raytheon, and used $2 billion to be able to fund groups which are challenging voters of color throughout America, starting with Wisconsin, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, Michigan, and Wisconsin. I'm very, very concerned. So you have these ultra right-wing billionaires, not just Musk. And we see Musk because he's the big, public figure. But the big money is coming from places like the Bradley Foundation, Paul Singer, known as the Vulture financially. These are people who are putting, we're not talking a few bucks, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars being put into this. In fact, the Wall Street Journal it's the Wall Street Journal. This is not exactly your left-wing publication. The Wall Street Journal said that right-wing groups put $140 million into suppressing the vote. That's from the Wall Street Journal. This is not from, Greg Palast under my hat conspiracy theory. It's Wall Street Journal. Okay. So the Wall Street Journal says that the right wing billionaires put in $140 million to take away people's rights to vote. And that's just the cold truth.
You've been on this beat for so long, and you really know the cast of characters so well. What are the solutions, the revisions, the ways in which things can even moderately give us a modicum of confidence about these voter rolls?
Well, number one, why don't you take care of your own vote? In fact, we have a site where you can download my film, Vigilantes Inc., for no cost. It's called saveyourvote.org. You can look up your registration, you can learn how to save your vote, etc. What can we do? One, get some popcorn and watch a movie so that you get some information. It's Vigilantes Inc. Again, go to gregpalast.com. And it's Leonardo DiCaprio has made this available for streaming for gratis.
Yeah, it's well done. Rosario Dawson narrates. It's very strong.
Yeah. So you'll enjoy the film. There's Martin Sheen, if you're watching on video, our executive producer. My favorite president, President Barton. And here's the thing: is that what can we do? Number one, Jesse Jackson, who was one of the people who helped launch my film nationally through Rainbow Push, Reverend Jesse Jackson. He actually spoke, just so you know, he got together with President Biden and Kamala Harris and said, for God's sake, watch Greg Palast's film. And then I want you to do something about it. They did hire a lawyer to help out on these issues of vigilante challenges, but they didn't do very much. Where was, and why hire a lawyer? You're president of the United States, Mr. Biden. Put the Justice Department on it. If in 1946, the Justice Department was ready to arrest the governor of Georgia for this activity, they're doing it now. For God's sake, Mr. Biden, my president, for the moment, please enforce the law. It's the Department of Justice. Yeah, let's have just a little bit of justice here. And, it's very difficult for Democrats to take on this issue because they've taken this position that anyone who challenges the elections and the legitimacy in America is an election denier, like Donald Trump. No, the difference is when Trump says the election was rigged, I'm not saying he's wrong. He knows it's rigged because his cronies have been rigging it. Now, I want to be very careful. Again, as an investigative reporter, I have to investigate before I report. There are millions of people denied the right to vote that should have been able to vote. Voters of color overwhelmingly. Did this make the difference? I'm looking at those numbers right now. I can tell you this, in states like Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona, no question, these vote suppression tactics made the difference. Did it make the difference in other states that Trump won, like Pennsylvania? I have to get the numbers, but it's looking like, once again, this was a Jim Crow election. Even if Trump, no matter what the numbers are, came through, It was a Jim Crow election, and we've got to deal with that because the GOP, and I'm not blaming them. I'm not partisan. I'm not telling you to vote for Trump or Harris. That's not my job. I'm just a reporter. But if we don't do something now, it's going to get worse for 28. And the GOP is not resting. They're going to be changing the voting rights laws. I think that the rest of the Voting Rights Act is going to go out the window.
Oh, I think there's no question about. I think there's no question about that. But this is a very important thing that Greg is saying to all of us, which is, I know that there's this stuff and it's kind of sexy with Musk and Starlink and the database and him messing with the numbers, and I'm not even discounting it. I mean, that's why I mentioned it in the context of our conversation. Like, I don't know, but I know what I know, and I know that Palast stuff is solid, and this is the good old-fashioned way to do it. It is the dependable way to do it. So you don't need Starlink and you don't need Musk. This is the real, clean, heavy lift, but it's being done, and it's getting lighter and lighter all the time by the GOP to shed the voter rolls of, in this case, millions of votes.
Millions. And you're right. I want people to understand this is not minor. This is millions. And again, you don't have to rely on Greg Palast. You can go to something called the United States Elections Assistance Commission, and they have all the data there. But most of my fellow reporters, the reason they became reporters, by the way, is that they're afraid of mathematics. I got my degree in economics and I taught statistics, so I'm not afraid of mathematics myself. So here's the thing. You're right. You don't need someone like Musk playing games with the computers and the vote totals. You don't need any of that stuff. I haven't seen any evidence of computer manipulation. I know some people think that might be there, but I haven't seen it yet. And again, I don't report it unless I've investigated it and got the hard facts. But I'm telling you right now that the hard facts are saying that old-fashioned vote suppression, though, again, it's been thrown into cyberspace. Like I said, one woman challenged 32,000 people. That she did by sending in a spreadsheet to her county offices saying, don't let these people vote. Now, that, again, while that's a brand new computer-aided Jim Crow, we don't need the manipulation computers. I haven't seen that yet. So I'm looking at everything, but the basic old-fashioned Jim Crow operations aided by computers. So hundreds of thousands of people at a crack on a single state can get knocked off. We're seeing that around the country. Again, I'm working as hard as I can to get the numbers. It looks really close. The question, I can tell you right now, Arizona, Nevada, absolutely 100%. Those states were lost to Trump through Jim Crow tactics, through this. I was in Arizona. If you go to Vigilante, if you look for watch the film Vigilantes Inc., which means go to gregpalast.com. It says go to Vigilantes. Again, you can stream it for free. But I'm telling you right now that we have to understand that we still have Jim Crow elections, and we got to put an end to it, because no matter what happened in this election, if it's successful, we're going to see more of this in 2 years and in 4 years.
Yeah, as I say, it's high art already, the way they've developed it and refined it, and it's only getting worse. So, yeah, we'll have a link to the movie and to the Palast website as well under this video and under the show today. Greg, you know what I think of your work. I'm just so glad that we can connect with you occasionally, and please stay in touch and visit again soon and let us know what you find out.
I will. I'm trying to get all this data. I may have to go to federal court to get this data because they don't want to tell you how many people they've knocked off the voter rolls. Isn't that disgusting? This is the United States of America. Democracy should be the number one thing that the courts protect. But it's a difficult path to take. And I really appreciate, Mark, that you've given me this platform to talk about the facts, not how Trump won or lost and, all that punditry stuff, but just the facts, ma'am.
Yeah.
And I'm going to come back to you, but it looks like there are at least a few of the states, if not all those swing states, were shoplifted through vote suppression tactics.
That's massive. And I look forward to that conversation. Greg Palast, everybody. Thanks, Greg. Right on.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Right on, everybody. Right on. Thanks for being with us. So, you have the Musk Starlink part of the conspiracy theory, and then you have the good old-fashioned voter suppression part of the conspiracy theory. And that's why I really wanted you to hear from Palast today, because I feel as though that is really a much closer putt to the hole than the Musk stuff. Now, that's not to say that the Musk stuff isn't legit at all. As I opened the show by saying, I'm your guy. I'll sit down with you. I'll look at data with you. I'll entertain these various conspiracy theories, at least to kick them around and discuss them. That doesn't mean that I necessarily buy them yet. But there is stuff that's kind of half-baked that's coming to the surface, and then there's the stuff that is fully baked. And I'd put Greg Palast in the category of fully baked. I mean, that really is an area that I know it's not as sexy as Elon Musk and Starlink data manipulation, but, when millions of people are shed from the voter rolls, that's a thing, okay? That's a thing that can influence an election outcome. So, I've got Kim's News. I want to get an update on what's happening. I also wanted to just mention some of what's happening in the emerging Trump administration. He's wasting no time to,
The Mark Thompson Show.
To make some big moves. He has Tom Homan, the border czar. He's the former acting ICE director, and he's very aggro on the mass deportations, as you are probably aware. We talked a bit about the ways in which the candidates for Senate GOP leader are, collecting around Donald Trump's ass to see who can affix their lips most completely. And that's going on now. So it's a battle of loyalty. J.D. Vance says that the U.S. could drop support for NATO if Europe tries to regulate Elon Musk's platform at all. So you can see already Musk gets a little something for his investment. I mean, it's a scary thought that the NATO alliance, and I know maybe there are many watching right now who are not fans, but in the shadow of World War II, the NATO alliance has been able to essentially keep peace in a union of countries that are at least signatories to that. The reason I'm halting at all about that is because it's been a rocky ride, and even in the face of now some NATO expansion, we have serious multi-year military conflict in Ukraine. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people have died. It's a very serious thing, but I will underscore the fact Ukraine is not part of NATO, but it really is right on the doorstep. And I know that there are probably those who are watching who say, well, NATO actually provoked Ukraine and provoked Russia by sidling up to Ukraine, et cetera. A conversation for another time. I'd be happy to have it. But all I'm trying to say is that Europe very much depends on the NATO alliance. And so this is a real problem moving forward. So, I like the slicing and dicing of the election, to be honest. I like to see things like where did the Latino vote go? I mean, the Donald Trump vote took off in states like New York and New Jersey that he lost. I think when you look at the Elon Musk conspiracy, the idea somehow that Starlink was used, I think you're really ignoring some of that stuff. Like, okay, then why did they pump up his vote in New York and New Jersey? They're not swing states, and they're not even states that he's going to win. But again, his share of that vote blossomed in this election. And, every data point from non-battleground areas that no one would bother to hack or to muck around with shows an enthusiasm for Trump. So again, I'm just looking at the whole picture. So when you find the statistically relevant stuff in swing states, you should also look at the statistically irrelevant stuff in non-swing states, and meaning Trump increased his share in all of these other places. And does that maybe mitigate the power of the argument that Musk messed with it? I mean, and Democrats actually did better than we may think in tough races. Democrats won in Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona. There'll be a recount in Pennsylvania, even in Texas. Trump won going away, but Colin Allred ran well ahead of Kamala Harris. So, again, these are conflicting data points, if you can see what I mean. Anyway, I mention this stuff because I think that all of these things exist in a context, and I'd love to have all the context before we, definitely pass judgment on whether or not this election was messed with that way, I found the disturbing realities of the election, and I think they're most organized around the fact that somehow this guy could appeal to enough people in America that he could win the general election, I saw that piece, was it Carlos Lozada in the New York Times? He says, I remember when Donald Trump was not normal. I remember when Trump was a fever that would break. I remember when Trump was running as a joke. I remember when Trump was best covered in the entertainment section. I remember when Trump would never become the Republican nominee. I remember when Trump couldn't win the general election. I remember when Trump's attacks on John McCain were disqualifying. I remember when Trump's Access Hollywood tape would force him out. I remember when Trump was James Comey's fault. I remember when Trump was the news media's fault. I remember when Trump won because Hillary Clinton was unlikable. I remember when 2016 was a fluke. I remember when the office of the presidency would temper Trump. I remember when the adults in the room would contain Trump. I remember when the Ukraine phone call went too far. I remember when Trump learned his lesson after the first impeachment. I remember when January 6th would be the end of Trump's political career. I remember when the 2022 midterms meant the country was moving on. I remember when Trump's indictments would give voters pause. I remember when Trump's felony convictions would give voters pause. I remember when Donald Trump would win because Joe Biden was old. I remember when Kamala Harris's joy would overpower Trump's fear-mongering. I remember when Trump was weird. I remember when Trump was not who we are. There have been so many attempts to explain away Trump's hold on the nation's politics and cultural imagination, to reinterpret him as aberrant and temporary. Normalizing Trump became an affront to good taste, to norms, to the American experiment. We can now let go of such illusions. Trump is very much part of who we are. Nearly 63 million Americans voted for him in 2016. 74 million did in 2020. And now, once again, enough voters in enough places have cast their lot with him to return him to the White House. Trump is no fluke, and Trumpism is no fad. After all, what is more normal than a thing that keeps happening? In recent years, I've often wondered if Trump has changed America or revealed America. I decided that it was both, that he changed the country by revealing it. After Election Day 2024, I'm considering an addendum to that. Trump has changed us by revealing how normal, how truly American Trump is. Throughout Trump's life, he's embodied every national fascination: money and greed in the 1980s, sex scandals in the 1990s, reality television in the 2000s, social media in the 2010s. Why wouldn't we deserve him now, he says. And he goes on. But I think it's a very long piece, or longer op-ed piece, but it is very much speaking to the essence of what America is, and how I think in our reasonableness, we don't like to think about it. But I think that op-ed speaks volumes. So I thought I'd share it with you. And if you have interest, email me and I'll send you a copy of it. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, listen, I've lost control. Things have run too long. What's the story, Kim? Talk to me. No, is Kim not with the show anymore? All right,
I'm
that's
with
how
the
long
show.
we've run, everyone.
I
Kim
don't
is
think that
gone.
we have
Yeah.
time for news. But
I blame you.
Yeah, okay.
I know
all
that
right.
we do have
Probably
time
is
for
my fault.
Courtney. I would like to hear from Courtney about the cold brew because we hear a lot from
yeah.
you
Well,
about how much
Courtney,
she loves the cold
please,
brew.
first of all, welcome everyone. My other half, Courtney, who doesn't like to appear on camera, so you're only going to hear her, but she is lovely. And you're really being cheated out of a treat because she is lovely and,
Thank you. That's so nice.
Yeah.
Can you
turn your headphones
yeah.
up? Up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Down.
Oh, down. Okay. All right. Okay.
Thank you for having me.
This is a professional show, so if you could get beyond the headphones thing and get on to
beyond hurting my hearing.
I love this Coachella Valley coffee, which I've been drinking for years, and so tell me what you've brought for us today, Courtney. You're not going to do your segment anymore. Courtney used to do True Crime Corner. She's not going to do it through the end of the year. You might still do one or two.
Maybe, yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm still, in fact, do you remember why we started True Crime Corner?
I do not. Let
me refresh your memory.
Okay.
So when you were starting the show, I mentioned to you that they had arrested a suspect in a murder that was a really big deal because it was one of the first murders where the main suspect was caught on social media.
Mm-hmm.
And it was these two young girls. They were 13 and 14, Abigail Williams and Liberty German, and they were murdered in Delphi, which is a city just north of Indianapolis. And it was tragic, as all of these murders are, but these are two very young girls who had the day off because it was a snow day from school, asked their parents to drive them to a national park, and they were walking on these railroad tracks, which sort of famously in that area, people walk on these railroad tracks when they're walking through the park. And one of the young girls took a photograph of the other young girl, and in the background is the suspect walking toward them. They also had the good sense, and I believe it was Abigail Williams, to record the suspect telling them to walk down the hill. He murdered them at the bottom of that hill because the railroad tracks were sort of atop of that hill. And
they found him. They discovered. They figured out who he was.
Found him, and I mentioned it to you, and you said, "Well, why don't you come on and talk about it?" Mm-hmm. Well, today, after I believe it was 3 weeks of trial, the suspect that they arrested has been found guilty of their murders.
Wow!
So Richard Allen, 52, was caught, tried, and found guilty just now, literally just about an hour ago. Yeah.
Wow. So you do have true crime breaking news.
I do have true crime breaking news.
Even as you also reveal the fact that you just won't be here regularly on Mondays with more true crime. But you may come through occasionally with things like this, like an update on a story that's of significance.
On this. Yeah, there's a lot going on. We've covered a lot of horrible things that have happened in the true crime space. And so I will be back to give updates on that. Yes.
All right. Well, we adore you, and I've talked about your love relationship with cold brew that comes from Coachella Valley Coffee. It is pretty great.
Yeah, it is. I love it. I mean, it's truly my favorite thing when I get up in the mornings. You know, besides saying good morning to you, it is first and foremost I go for the cold brew, and then I say hi.
Yeah, we all need our coffee sometimes before we say hi. There it is on the Coachella Valley Coffee website, CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Do enter our discount code MarkT at checkout.
Yeah, and let us know what you think. It's great.
You'll get 10% off anything on the site, not just coffee. They've got tea, they've got loose tea. You love their teas too.
I love their teas too. I'm a big fan.
They have bag teas, they have loose leaf teas.
Yep.
Pretty great.
It's great. Yeah.
They do a lot of stuff.
It's really great.
All organic and from
and they support
farms.
women-owned farms. And we need a little bit more support of women right now, don't we?
Well, apparently we do, Courtney.
Unfortunately.
All right. Always fun talking to you.
Thank you for having me. Hi, Kim.
Yeah.
Hi, Tony.
Yeah.
All right. Great.
Courtney, thank you.
Courtney. Yes, we do need support of women.
I know.
Yeah. It's a tough week for certain realities. No, so for certain realities.
4
that we all
years
face.
is what it's going to be.
Like the reality of being a woman.
Yeah.
That
exactly.
reality.
No, I mean the reality of who's making laws in this country. I mean, and who's going to be making laws. All right.
So.
I blame you.
Well, I don't think I'm to blame, Kim. But thank you very much. All right, Courtney. Thank you, love. Love seeing you, Courtney, even if I've got to bribe you to bring you into the studio.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I am, women voted against women. That's so true. That was a weird one, huh, Kim? You must admit in this election, that was a definite weird one.
You know what? I'm so naive and lame because after the depression of the Hillary Clinton debacle, I really thought, I let myself believe that America would vote for a woman. I really did. And it apparently, no, we're still not ready for a woman in the White House. So.
I mean, what's bizarre is that we're surrounded by countries that are voting in women left and right. I mean,
even Mexico, come on.
Yeah. I mean, literally left and right. They come from both. In France, it's the right, and then in Latin America, it's the left. So will you let me know just what's happening here? Do I have Karen now and then your
Karen.
news,
Karen
or is that?
Well, I don't know if we have time for news, but you have time for Karen Dawn, and she's ready to go.
Okay, so that is what we will do then. Guys, thank you for being here. We are a crowd-funded show. We exist really because of your support. We have names that run at the end of our show. That's everybody who supports us on Patreon and PayPal. And then, of course, so many come in and we make a big deal out of the super stickers, super chats. That's another great way to support this show. So thank you. I'll donate $10 if you put on a small play with the Kamala finger puppet. Where is the Kamala? I do have the Kamala finger puppet. I might, $10. We're crowdfunded. Do I humiliate myself that way, Kim?
I think so. It can
What
be
do you
short.
think? I can't.
Yeah. I think
well,
so.
I have Kamala. She's here. Kamala is, she's always, well, I think we learned a little something about everyone in America who didn't vote for me. And I wonder if Joe maybe should have stepped back sooner. Uh-oh, here's Joe. I don't know what you're talking about. I could have kicked his ass just like I did the first time. I love that my Biden sounds like Nixon.
He does
anyway,
kind of, yeah.
Sayonara.
Sayonara,
these
everybody.
two. Yeah, sadly. It's a...
Sayonara, sucker!
Yeah. Stan Pollock, CPA, our favorite CPA, says, sorry, Courtney could not do true crime. I enjoyed her segments. I also disagree with Kim. America will vote for a woman president. Just has to be the right one. Yeah. Yeah, get a good woman in there, Kim. Get on that. It is...
we're never going to find a woman who's good enough for men to vote for.
Well, here is the...
Her laugh will be wrong.
And the
Her
double
voice will be
standard applied.
shrill.
Yeah,
she can come with a million plans, and the other guy could be a total loser and a dud, and still, it's not okay.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, in both cases, Clinton and Harris, they were the better candidate. I don't know how you could not look at who they were running against and think Trump was better in both regards. Come on.
Yeah, of course, that's true. It's just it is also a double standard. I really feel as though I couldn't believe the double standard the media applied. The notion somehow that Kamala Harris had to have all these specifics on an economic plan, et cetera, and he just had to, blurt out some stuff, call people names, say we were in the worst shape ever, open border, couple of quick talking points. There was nothing there. If you look at the Trump website, there's the economic stuff is all, it's just generalities. It's nonsense.
Yeah.
Returning America with a powerful industrial sector. Great. Do you have a plan to do that? Or is that it's all crap. So, but propaganda apparently wins. And also, I think as noted in that editorial I was reading to you, it tied into something in America. So, and I couldn't listen for a few days, says Joy, but today I'm gaining stability. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Joy, I get it.
Coming back.
I think it's a mistake to check out. I do.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a mistake to check out. So, in any case, I will, visit many of these things. I have much more to visit today, but we are right up against it. So, we like to check in monthly on the world of animals. We do it in a segment called A Word About Animals.
Now, a word about animals on the Mark Thompson Show.
And it's not just nothing. We talk about new policies and the new presidency and administration in relation to animals as well. How about it for Karen Dawn from DawnWatch.com? You can check her out. She's got a very robust Facebook following, and DawnWatch.com can put you in touch with all of her stuff. Her newsletter I get regularly and enjoy it because it does focus on animal issues worldwide. So give us the state of the state. What's going on, Karen Dawn? It's been a second.
Yeah, greetings from Austin, Mark. It's so good to be back, and I'm outdoors because it's so darn beautiful here, which it isn't in summer. So, I want to thank you so much for plugging my DawnWatch Facebook page. But Facebook stopped sharing links somewhere in the last year, and that's what I mostly share with DawnWatch. So, even though I've got like 50 followers on Twitter versus many thousands and thousands on Facebook, I'm actually posting a lot more to X now. So I'd love it if your folks would help get the following up there on animal news. And it's all animal news there, nothing else on DawnWatch. It's DawnWatch Inc. on X. So
okay, cool.
We've, I wanted to chat today about a couple of sad stories for specific animals that have turned into what might become good legislation and also good law for some. We've talked before here about Seder the goat. And for those who haven't seen our segments on this or don't know about this, this is a goat who, it's a couple of years ago now, was raised for 4-H by a beautiful young lass in Northern California. And she fell in love with Seder, and once they got him to the fair, she just, realized that she couldn't bear to part with him. And her mother couldn't bear for her to, given when she saw her crying over the goat. And Mum got in touch with the people who had bid the highest for the goat, $950, and said, could we possibly give you your money back? And if you, don't barbecue this particular goat at your church fair. And they said, absolutely, they agreed with it. But the fair said no. And Mum then just took it upon herself to run off with Seder and, figure she'll deal with the legalities of it later. They hid Seder on a sanctuary while they talked about it. And, basically what was going on here was she was breaking a contract. This wasn't grand theft. It was a broken contract. It was a civil matter. Yet the Shasta Sheriff's Office got involved, and they went and they took Seder from this sanctuary that she had put her at, and they killed Seder. And thank heavens, the family who this had happened to hired a lawyer, Vanessa Shakur, I think her name, is a wonderful animal rights lawyer. And this has been ongoing for a couple of years now. But in the first piece we have being settled is that they did settle with with Shasta County. They settled, and they got $300,000 for Shasta County's role in what was done to Seder and the violation of this young girl's rights. Now, what we don't have is the violation of the animal rights, and we're a ways away from that still. We're seeing that in the law, but at least people are starting to understand that when you love an animal dearly, it's not all that different from when you love a family member dearly. And this, what's so beautiful about this is it's not a dog, it's not a cat, which people are more and more understanding that folks adore like pets, but this is a goat. So the fact that they have come out with this settlement and then they still aren't finished with the suit is really, really good news. And I know some of your folks will be happy to hear about that.
We did that. I mentioned that story the other day, and I liked, although my pronunciation, Kim, I think is not appropriate. Karen says it Seder, and I was calling the little sweet goat Cedar, because it's CEDAR.
Don't trust my pronunciation. You can all hear that I'm an Aussie and I'm going to say things different. So
Okay. I trust you always on these things more than I trust my. But anyway, the dog, the animal's name is CEDAR. So I said cedar, but Seder. Anyway, we were talking about it, and it's a heartbreaking story, and it's heartbreaking the way the guys who are, the cops went to grab this sweet animal, and like everybody's just doing my job. Yeah, you know what? There's real emotion, real lives associated with so much of this stuff. So, but as you say, and then I'll shut up and then let you continue. But I love the story too for the fact that these are sentient creatures. We're bound to them the same way we're bound to dogs and cats. They are no different. The way they process pain and affection and fear and all of these things is the same. And so, this was the same as running across the state to grab somebody's dog and see to its destruction, and then chopping it up to eat it. I mean, which is
what
really
we don't
the way,
have yet is a settlement with the fair. And what I really don't like, and I had shared an article and then shared the a paragraph out of that article, which disturbed me, which is that they don't have a settlement yet with the fair, and that the California Attorney General's office is representing the fair in this. And I'm like, really? My tax dollars are representing a fair that, even though the mum went and got permission from the people that the goat was supposed to go to, and under these special circumstances, apparently the girl's 4 grandparents, or 3 or 4 grandparents, had died within the last few months. The fair insisted. They so did the wrong thing. So I'm, not thrilled that the California Attorney General is representing the fair in this matter. But I think that Cedar or Seder's family will prevail, and I think that'll help.
And they got that $300,000, but that poor kid, that doesn't, all the money in the world doesn't ease that pain. Anyway, what the squirrel story, I saw it actually mentioned here, and somebody wanted to hear it. Is Phineas says, Karen Dawn, talk about Peanut the chipmunk, just squirrel. Yeah, is what I thought.
And Fred the raccoon, his brother.
Yeah, give us the story here for those who, might have been distracted by other stuff.
Yeah. So this is the story that broke, I think it was a day or two before the election. Turned out to be a bit of an election issue because, it was New York State, very blue state. But the main reason it was an election issue is that the Republicans picked it up, and Elon Musk tweeted about it. And I think 33 million people saw that tweet, whereas the Democrats ran away from it. And I think that's a shame because we do have a nice history of animal issues being a bipartisan issue. And we really hope that this is an issue that both sides will pick up on. I think almost everybody knows what happened from social media, but this is a squirrel who 7 years ago was found by this guy who runs Freedom Farm Sanctuary. And I think at the time he might not have had a sanctuary, but he found the squirrel whose mother had been killed. Orphaned a squirrel, took the squirrel in, raised the squirrel, attempted to release the squirrel in his backyard, not far from where he found him. But because the squirrel had been hand-raised and not raised by a squirrel mummy, wasn't able to survive, and got beaten up, half his tail chewed off. And so he thought, you know what, I guess you're going to be my pet squirrel. And it was such an unusual thing, a little bit like what I do with my turkeys at Thanksgiving. People love to see an unusual animal being cuddled and loved. And as you can see in the video that is being shared there, his relationship with the squirrel was pretty adorable. And I certainly understand that, in that I've had pet squirrels who've lived outdoors, and I had meant to share a photo of Mrs. Squirrel, who used to come and literally knock on my back patio door when I wasn't around, and she wanted nuts from me. But he had the squirrel inside. Now, it turns out that it's not legal to have a squirrel inside in New York State. And that's a darn good law, because we wouldn't want people willy-nilly taking squirrels out of the wild where they're wonderfully happy and thinking, oh, I want a pet squirrel, I'll just go grab him and take him away from his family. But something you and I have discussed before on this show is, you know what, it's not one size fits all and there need to be exceptions. This guy should have got a license, and he says he was in the process of getting a license when somebody reported him. And I think it was at least half a dozen officials came to his door and made him sit in the bathroom while they did had a search warrant to take this squirrel Peanut away. And they also took away Fred the raccoon, who was also living in the house. And I came onto the story while they had just been taken away. And then we learned within 2 days they had killed them. I really don't like it when people use the word euthanize for a situation like that, not because I want them to be saying murder, but because euthanize means, and if anybody who looks this up in the dictionary, it means that you're gently killing somebody who's very sick or who wants to die. And that just is not the situation here. They killed Peanut and Fred. They said that Peanut, unsurprisingly, had bitten one of the people the complete strangers who tried to handle him, and that they needed to test him for rabies. But given that he'd been in this house for 7 years and hadn't been shown any signs of rabies, that's kind of ridiculous. And what we had here was just some, crazy government overreach and just lack of basic compassion, not just for the animals, but for the people who cared them and loved them, cared for them and loved them. And it's funny, Kim and I had a little bit of an email chat about this, and she said, well, he shouldn't have had the squirrel in there. And she wasn't saying it was great, but she also did mention you shouldn't have had the squirrel in there without a license. You should have known something was coming. And I'm like, yeah, you should have known something was coming, like a letter saying you better get a license for that squirrel, not law enforcement showing it up at his house, taking the squirrel and the raccoon away and then killing them. This was crazy stuff. So the good news is that people have been so incensed about this. And, if you were watching on election night, it's interesting. I was listening to your wonderful show today. You didn't mention Peanut, but if you were watching on stations that had voters on the right as well as the left, which is what I do, I watch Breaking Points and stuff like that. Oh my word, there was a lot of justice for Peanut coming across that thread. I mean, it was constant. And that's because as much as people, it's this cognitive dissonance that people eat animals and they try not to think too much about what happens to them. They also get very, very moved by individual animals and what happens and basic kindness to animals. And so it really had an effect. And now a Long Island legislature has put forward Peanut's Law. And that is an amendment to the current conservation laws. And they will, I made notes here. It says that any animal who is taken, we've got to have a 72-hour waiting period at least before anything happens to that animal, so that people who are responsible have time to intervene and put forward suits. And just giving sanctuaries more respect, because even though Peanut was not an official, one of his sanctuary animals, this was a sanctuary that they invaded and took Peanut from. So this, and it is a Republican legislator has put forward this law, but I'm so hopeful that he gets plenty of bipartisan support on that.
Well, this is, as you suggested, is a bipartisan thing historically, and this particular story has so swept up so many people from both sides that it's remarkable to me that just to play the politics of this, that the Democrats ceded that ground to the Republicans, because Trump, and I've got nothing really good to say about Trump, but Trump actually retweeted this Peanut the squirrel thing. Okay, so for all of you people who think this crap doesn't matter, it does. This is if you don't care about animals particularly or whatever, to whatever extent, these are politically relevant issues as well, for the reasons that you detailed, Karen. People feel strongly about sort of the cruel and unusual torture and death associated with these sweet creatures, innocent creatures. So there were the politics of this involved as well.
I so appreciate the way you put that you can't believe the Democrats ceded that ground. And, I think we do have a history of one thing that you and I spoke about, is that the Democrats tend to take the animal vote for granted and they are willing to cede ground there. And I think Peanut might be letting them know that it's probably a good idea to stop doing that, because people care passionately about basic animal cruelty.
Yeah. Love your visits. Thank you for being here. Daily Animal World News is your world of DawnWatch. Again, I get the newsletter. It hits my email, so I don't need to look at X or wherever else you're posting stuff.
Yep.
And I recommend people get that at, is it DawnWatch.com, right?
Yes.
Yeah. DawnWatch.com is where you can find Karen's stuff. Karen, thank you. I look forward to next month and getting an update. Hang on tight. It's going to be an interesting ride. Thanks a lot. See you. Karen Dawn, everybody.
Join the flock. Again next time for A Word About Animals on The Mark Thompson Show.
Right on.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Thank you all. I am excited about days ahead. We've got some great guests. I'm just looking ahead on the large Mark Thompson Show calendar. My God. Who's on the big calendar, Kim? You're the calendar. You're the keeper of the calendar, Kim.
The keeper of the calendar.
Whether you like to, yeah.
Tomorrow we've got.
Kim, how are you?
An interesting conversation. We have, remember our Republican friend Jamie Miller from Florida?
Oh yeah, he's got to be feeling good. A bounce in Jamie Miller's step these days.
We're going to talk to him. We're going to see what happened there in Florida and what he's thinking about the next 4 years. Is he having regrets? What's going on?
I
don't think
am glad that we're having him on, because we got a lot of emails. Why do you always have the lefties on, Democrats on? Get somebody over here as a right winger. So we do. We got he's full on right wing. You're going to love him.
Full on right wing. And then
Mo Black's brother, Fat Andy.
Yeah, we're working on Fat Andy, but he's not on the calendar yet, I don't think.
Right after that, we have David K. Johnston will be on the show.
Right on. That's, Now,
So
David, because I saw this earlier, David did own right away the fact that he had made the prediction that he thought Trump would lose by 10 million popular votes in the popular vote. But so I guess I've seen this in the chat. Here it is. Mars said this, and David K. Johnson said Kamala would win by 15 million. Such an expert. Well, again, first of all, he had the courage to make a prediction. And he owned it right away. He also had the courage to say, hey, I was wrong. He said, I was wrong about this country. He said, I'm really kind of recalibrating everything now based on these returns. So that I really think, you can be snide about it, but I think the guy owns it. He doesn't pretend like he didn't say it. When it comes to considering conspiracy theories, the Trumpians taught us well. Yeah, Debbie says. I mean, this is the problem. People are reluctant, I think, on the left right now to point to conspiracies because they feel, now I feel like I'm one of them, those who challenge the legitimacy of the 2020 election. I'm enjoying the Coachella Valley coffee, says Ms. Organic. I love it. I love that you love it. I love that you're enjoying it. And again, go to CoachellaValleyCoffee.com, mark T at checkout, 10% off. George Floyd, Food Lines turned up the 2020 votes. That may be true, no contendo. I think you're right. There was a lot going on at the time. It was a period of political activism. How about a $1.99 from Tony R. 455? And thank you, everybody who's contributed to the show today.
Big shout out.
Big shout out. We're crowdfunded, so need the crowdfunding. What is this? I can't.
GP dropping receipts. This is suspicious. Sorry, writes
Greg,
Jules T.
Greg Palast.
Oh,
Greg Palast dropping receipts.
Yeah.
Jules T. I mean, he did drop receipts. I think he's. Yeah, I think he showed his math.
No, that's what he's saying.
Yeah. Oh, that's what he's saying. Okay. Thanks, Jules. In that case, big shout out.
Big shout out.
Yeah. All right. We wanted to try something where we read a bunch of comments. Didn't we want to do that? We can do that soon. But until then, I'll just read a bunch of comments.
We have it. Throw it up there. Let's get it. Let's see how many.
Try it. Yeah, we haven't.
3 minutes.
This is a half-baked plan, but yeah.
Let's get it going.
Mark, please give Dave from San Ramon or Danville A big shout out, says James Pacheco, because Dave from San Ramon or Danville was wearing a Mark Thompson t-shirt at the In-N-Out Burger on Saturday. I love it. I love it.
Nice when you see those in the wild.
Big shout out.
Big shout out.
I love it. Thank you, Dave from San Ramon or Danville. Pretty cool. That's very, very cool. By the way, our merch site is being redone. Even as we're speaking now, it is being redone, and there'll be some new merch stuff and a refreshing, because we really pulled that all together so quickly. And we don't really make any money on the merch, but it's a fun thing that we have out there, and people really enjoy it. So I think there's going to be some more enjoyable merch stuff for the holidays, so you can jump on that. Again, that's the merch site. But it will be, it's going to be updated, so it's going to look a little different than it does right now, than you're seeing it. Voter rolls weren't millions, right? I don't know what that means, Ronnie, but the idea
purge
somehow...
the voter rolls, and I think Greg Palast said, it was more than 2 million by his count.
Exactly. Thank you. Why did so many Americans not vote? Exactly. Well, you could ask that question a lot of the time, couldn't you? Of course, it was rigged. 12 million people don't just vanish, says Steve. They cheated. They always cheat, says Virginia, at everything. And I do think that there is a sense of gaming the system that the GOP particularly does. But I know if GOP was here, they'd say, well, didn't Joe Biden game the system by just bestowing, along with other Democrats, the nomination on Kamala Harris without going through? It's always a weird retort, because, like, what do you care what the Democrats do? Why do you? I'm talking about gaming the vote. I'm talking about manipulating the vote. I'm not talking about manipulating who you end up running against, although you could say, I mean, that's part of the system. So, no, he didn't really win. He cheated, says Debbie. Cheating is the name of the GOP game, says Karen. I don't know. I find it really suspicious that the Republicans got every single darn thing, says Cheryl. Well, they didn't get every single darn thing. They got a lot of those darn things. They didn't get some of these seats that, as in, this is one of the things that makes it sort of suspicious, these down ballot races in which Democrats prevailed, but Republicans, in this case Donald Trump, did win top of ticket. But I take your point. Julie says, should votes count when the voter is brainwashed? Hell no, rigged. Well, I mean, the electorate is underinformed and also undermotivated to get informed. Right. I mean, the people who watch this show and who regularly interact with us, you guys have a level of involvement and of interaction with an interest with your political system and what's going on that it's just not reflected in most households. It's not a put down. They're distracted, or, you know, they're just trying to look. I think they should become more connected, but the problem is they've been connected in the ways that they listen to a podcast all the time. Maybe it's Rogan, maybe it's Theo Vaughn, whatever. They begin to take in a kind of propaganda that's laced throughout, and then Fox News Channel is one of the biggest propaganda machines.
As mentioned on the show this week, or last week, you can go from one end of America to another on a road trip and never lose connection with a conservative talk radio station ever.
Yeah, they certainly.
So what do we have served up to us? That
they control broadcast without question, Sinclair stations, etc. They've effectively locked out the Democratic information, or if you want to call it Democratic propaganda, for GOP propaganda or information on stations, radio, and television in this country. As beautiful as the sunset says, investigate the vote. Why were ballot boxes and ballot box results connected to Elon Musk's Starlink? Exactly. That's what we've been talking a bit about today. I don't think that conversation is over by any means. Some very sad losers. Donald won because his opposition were lacking in every way. I do think the opposition was lacking in some ways, but I don't know about every way. And I felt as though he was so, but again, this is maybe my bias. I just felt he was so wrong for the job based on everything from having engineered a coup to jacking documents and top secret documents and sharing them with we don't even know who, then hiding those documents from FBI and other government officials that were just trying to get them back, saying you'd return them, and then actually, again, secreting them in closets and ballrooms. And I mean, it's crazy. I mean, so he seems so manifestly just ill-equipped for this thing that he's just basically a name caller. But again, knows how to market the right things at the right time. And since voters don't really pay attention to the last minute, he was able to rally it at the last minute. And again, he's been also burning it in through the propaganda machines that we mentioned. But Colin Patterson would disagree. If it was truly rigged, says teacher Lori, in various ways, a whining needs to stop and lawsuits need to start immediately. Trump was filing lawsuits before the election. Use this tactic now, if applicable. POTUS immunity now. Has Trump explained his little secret? De Hagville asks. And I always wondered what the little secret was that he mentioned with Mike Johnson. It was a weird thing. Tony, if you can rally that, yeah, I'd love to see it again. We'll try to share that one piece of video with you before we say goodbye, because he did reference like this sort of extra thing they were going to do to win the election.
Yeah, we got a little secret, Mike Johnson, and he kind of gave him a little smirk and then moved on. You know?
We showed it here when it originally happened, but Tony will try to dust it off for you and find it. And I think it hasn't been revealed as to what it was, but it seemed as though it was a safety valve mechanism in case the vote didn't go his way. I mean, it was kind of stated in that context. There needs to be an investigation into the vote counting process. I'm very concerned. Thank you for that, Patricia. Gordon says, I'm very concerned that Musk is colluding with Putin. Well, Musk is meeting with Putin without question, and Musk has access to so much by virtue of his power over information and technology. I've been talking about this since we've been on the air. And everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, but a handful of people jump on me when I'm critical of Musk this way. But he has access to policies, to crafting legislation, to legislators. In this case now, the President of the United States, he is going to serve in the government while getting all of these government contracts. He has massive government contracts for SpaceX and beyond. And so he's already looking at ways in which he can enrich himself, and they have already enriched themselves with this victory. So, did you find it? Okay, here it is.
And I think with our little secret, we're going to do really well with the House, right? Our little secret is having a big impact. He and I have a secret. We'll tell you what it is when the race is over.
I'm in trouble keeping track of what things Trump is going to tell me about. It's the health care plan is one. The infrastructure plan is another. His now secret as to how to win the House is another. None of these things ever get exposed.
You were talking about Musk, and wasn't he, I think he was on a pretty important phone call over the weekend.
Wasn't he on a call with Putin?
Yeah. And Trump. Like, how does Musk shoehorn himself in now to international politics and being at the side of the president? Someone was saying, oh, it's going to be Musk running for president in 2028. And I think we have to be thankful that he was born in South Africa and he is not an American by birth. So he can't run.
He was working here actually without legal status for when he first got here. But yeah, he doesn't.
An illegal immigrant? What?
Yeah, he couldn't be. And if you go to Trump's hotels and resorts, you'll find plenty of people who are here illegally. He's not employing Americans. He's employing low rent and low cost labor. This is from No Contendo. Guess how long before Sam Bankman-Fried runs the Treasury Department? Exactly. Well, crypto is getting a shot in the arm. You have the tech bros and I'm just going to say it generically. The kind of crypto bros are back in the world of technology as it relates to finance and other things. Got a big shot in the arm. So that is undeniable. Just Give Me the Truth says Biden and Harris both did the absolute minimum in every respect. No wonder people want to punish the Democrats. Well, I don't think that's quite fair. I think, look, you know where I stand on this. I'm just going to summarize it by saying Biden should have stepped back. It should have been a one-term president, and there should have been a primary. That's all I'll say. I mean, there should have been a primary because, as I said over and over, Kamala Harris, not really battle-tested. She benefited enormously from all of this enthusiasm. When Biden stepped back, there was a sense that, oh, my God, she's got that momentum to carry it all the way. But she, I think, And I think she campaigned very well. I think she campaigned as well as one could, with a couple of notable exceptions. And those exceptions are notable because they probably mattered. You need to split that baby, which is really hard, distinguishing yourself from an incumbent and yet also being loyal to the incumbent. It's really hard to do, but it's not as hard as she made it look. So, I agree. Get ready for the economy to crash. I agree with part of that, what you said. Running Sloth says, get ready for the economy to crash. They want all the money, in capital letters. It's a bunch of mentally ill people who refuse to hold Trump to account. Sick. Yeah, I don't know. There are a bunch of American voters who want Trump in, so they feel let down by this system. I think they have short memories. I think they don't, of course, this is, my bias. I don't think they understand the totality of the situation or have taken a moment to understand it. But again, maybe that is my bias. I do believe the prosecution of messaging is something that really, you have to tell people what you're doing for them. You have to tell them that you're managing drug prices. You have to tell them that you have put together any number of things from the CHIPS Act to CHIPS Act is one thing. The reason I'm halting is something. CHIPS Act, you can play both ways. Like it might have been a gift to the industry. So I have to look at these things and just suggest, in general, you need to message better and then decide what things you want to message around. I do think the track record of the Biden administration, you may feel it's tepid, you may feel it's not as progressive as you want it to be. I get it. But when you can negotiate drug prices and when you can point to an infrastructure bill that is pouring money into legit infrastructure projects nationwide, in addition to all the pork and everything that has to be included in a bipartisan bill, I think there's a lot to message about. There's a lot to scream about. And there wasn't enough screaming and there wasn't enough messaging. I guess that might be a way to put it. I don't have any sympathy for people voting for Trump, says Nancy. Losing their job, Republicans don't represent the working class. This is interesting. I want to just spend 1 second as we finish. Oh, wow, it's late, isn't it? Gosh, oh, my God. Well, look, I can only go till Thursday here, everybody. Well, tomorrow I want to spend a moment on this because I had a really revealing conversation after the election with a kind of a power broker type guy who was saying to me, Mark, I'm done with it. These people are voting against their own interests, and I'm done voting for their interests if they're not going to vote for them. And it was a really, it was like a cold slap in the face. It was like, if these people don't care about their world enough to vote against Donald Trump, then I'm not going to worry about them anymore. I'm not going to worry about their health care. I'm not going to worry about, the safety net. Right. It was really wild because this is a guy who normally votes that way to worry about the health care. He says, it's not going to affect me. He says, I got tens of millions of dollars. You guys don't want to vote for yourselves? Great. I won't vote for you. It's like, wow. I think you can have that level of disgust about things. You know what I mean? And I know we all have it on some level, but I'd encourage you to not be so disgusted. There's still stuff that can be done, So, I'd love to continue more, but I'm told that we have to wrap up. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
I will say this. Our Patreon and PayPal links are at the bottom of every video. I guess I should have mentioned that when we had 3,500 people watching live. I should have mentioned where you can go to Patreon or PayPal. If I could just peel off a few of them, we can keep going here. But tomorrow we talk to a right-winger who will slap me around for a while, so that'll be fun to watch. Tell your friends, get them in early. And we also have, of course, the great David K. Johnston, the Pulitzer Prize winner, joins us in hour 2 tomorrow. We have some stuff that we didn't get to today that I will get to. Among those things, I've got a juicy Law and Disorder. I promise you, it will not disappoint. And it is politics-related in part. Kim's doing After Party Live next, so check that out. And until tomorrow, everyone, the great Shadow Stevens.
I'm Shadow Stevens for The Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
That's all the time we have, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Out of time. Bye-bye.
I'm going up to the Starlink right now to manipulate some votes. Till tomorrow. Bye-bye.